expert. He told us a little earlier that the airline now faces a massive bill as a result of the system outage.
In any major event like this, it's a question of repositioning the aircraft, getting staff into the right location before they can get themselves back on track again. I mean, it's going to cost BA in excess of £100 million, I guess. You know, most passengers, because it's an EU-registered airline, will be able to rely on the EU regulation 261/2004, which sets out the basic rights to care and indeed compensation. We saw only a few weeks ago what happened when United in a rather unfortunate situation and their effect on their share price and indeed reputation. And BA, you know, seeing consumers curled up on yoga mats at Terminal 5 is not going to do anything for their reputation in the near future.
OK, I want to show you this because markets, they're currently closed in London. That's for the bank holiday. But IAG, the International Airlines Group, that's the parent company for British Airways. They own British Airways. They own Iberia, Spain's low-cost carrier Vueling, etc. So they're traded, IAG, traded both in London and Madrid. But, of course, as I said, London closed. But this is what IAG shares are doing at the moment in Madrid, just below, just down, I should say, a pinch under 2.6%. Of course, we'll keep our eyes open when London resumes trading tomorrow and see what sort of hit, if any, that IAG takes then. But we'll keep across the BA story for you. Also, as you've been hearing today, the new French president, Emmanuel Macron, he will meet with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, for the very first time. Now, the Kremlin, it was kind of hoping that the meeting would take place under rather different circumstances, because you may remember, in the recent French election campaign, Mr. Putin, he kind of voiced his support, not for him, he voiced his support for the Eurosceptic candidate, Marine Le Pen, who lost to Mr. Macron. Nonetheless, though, the relationship between France and Russia remains very important for both sides. France, this is why, France is Russia's biggest foreign investor. In the first 3 months of this year, French businesses injected nearly $800 million into the Russian economy. Look how that compares to some of the other countries. Germany, only $350 million, and the United States, a piddling $130 million. So very important. But there's still significant tension between Russia and the West, of course, following the country's ongoing dispute with Ukraine. Of course, Moscow, we know, is suffering from, well, the whole of Russia is suffering from those EU sanctions, preventing exports of oil drilling equipment. We know also military goods, they've been prevented going into Russia. Brussels also froze funding for some of Russia's biggest companies. Well, Christopher Granville, he's managing director at the research company TS Lombard. Earlier, we asked him what the Russian president hopes to gain from this meeting in France.
President Putin wants to cultivate a new relationship with a new European leader to see if he can chip away at the European consensus on maintaining sanctions, regardless of what Putin considers is a continued conflict in southeastern Ukraine, which is the formal cause of the major sanctions. President Macron will presumably, as an ambitious new and young leader, will want to carve out a certain profile and dimension in his foreign policy, and the Russian angle has always been characteristic of French policy in the Gaullist tradition, which Macron doesn't explicitly hail from, but you know, the French governing and ruling elite very much taps into that tradition. As economy minister of France, Macron did show up in Moscow and he made positive remarks about removing sanctions, but I guess that he's unlikely to distance himself explicitly from the European consensus. So I guess that the major thing to look out for today is there any sign of any new initiative on that conflict resolution? That would be important for investment. At stake here are large foreign direct investment flow. It is significant. Major French companies are there: Total, L'Oreal, Auchan, and I guess that more could come. The problem with sanctions is not so much that they stop activity, existing activity, is that they rule out future and new investment.
We are going to, of course, here on BBC World News, keep across that meeting between the French and Russian president. But let's go from that to Sri Lanka now, because in Sri Lanka, expensive infrastructure projects are lying unused. All of this as the country is weighed down by Chinese loans used to fund those infrastructure projects. The economy in Sri Lanka really struggling with a debt crisis. And so now the government is being forced to hand over control of some of those projects to Beijing. Our very own Yugita Lamai reports now from Sri Lanka.
Hambantota Port in southern Sri Lanka. Opened in 2010, it cost more than $1 billion and was paid for with loans from China.
There was just one ship here this morning and it left a little while ago. The next one doesn't arrive until tomorrow. Compare that with this country's other port in Colombo, which sees dozens of ships going in and out each day. So all of this has been built at Hambantota, but barely anyone's using it. For Sri Lanka, this port has become a large investment that's bringing few returns. That means the country is unable to pay back the money it borrowed to build it. And so instead, the Sri Lankan government is now planning to give a major stake in the port to a Chinese firm. It could be as high as 80%.
It is ill-affordable for an activity that doesn't bring any economic return. You can keep the place closed and pay out. Why should you do that? Then the next option is look at people who'd like to come and take a stake.
And there are other mega projects China is investing in.
Here, a brand new city is being created off the coast of Colombo. It'll have swanky corporate offices, shiny apartment blocks, parks, malls, and even a marina. All of this is being built by a Chinese state-owned company that's investing about $1.5 billion. But in return for that money, about 2/3 of this new city will be handed over to the firm. So, like the proposed deal at the Hambantota port, China will effectively control another part of Sri Lanka.
Some China-backed projects led to protests earlier this year from locals unwilling to sell their land, homes and farms for development. But not all Chinese investment has been without benefit. The many highways and roads being constructed have helped boost tourism. But Sri Lanka is trapped in a debt crisis and owes $8 billion to China alone. So whether good or bad, the government here doesn't have much room to negotiate on the kind of deals it strikes to help its economy and its people. Yogita Limai, BBC News, Sri Lanka.
Okay, let me leave you a couple of stories making headlines around the world. The United States could extend that ban on laptops and tablets on planes to cover all international flights in and out of the US. America's Homeland Security says there is a real threat. In March, the US banned electronics larger than a mobile phone from flights departing from the Middle East and North Africa. And Russia has entered the highly competitive air travel market by launching its first post-Soviet mainline commercial aircraft. It's the MS-21. There she is, just completed its maiden flight. It'll be going head-to-head with the Boeing 737 and Airbus's A320. So do stay tuned for more business coverage here on BBC World News. Especially, we're very excited today. Oh, they've even stuck this in. I'm launching my brand new show, Talking Business with Aaron Hesselhurst, a business show with a difference. It's at 13:30 GMT, Monday to Friday, right here. There you go. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
We're living in a global, interconnected world. Every individual and all countries are deeply connected. We're all affected by events that take place even in the most distant parts of the world. This rapid shrinking offers us challenges and economic opportunities. Together, we can shape the future, we can shape the entire world.
Join the conversation, join the war.
The world of business doesn't stop for a second, whether you're investing for the future or seeking new opportunities around the globe, enjoying the best that life has to offer, or simply trying to put food on the table. Business, with its endless deals and innovations, underpins everything we do. So cut through the jargon and understand the forces that shape our world. Join me, Aaron Hesselhurst, for Talking Business here on BBC World News.
We're eating more fish than ever, making it one of the world's most traded food commodities. Fish consumption was 9.9 kilograms per person in the world in the 1960s. That's risen to 20 kilograms per person, and the world's population is a lot bigger. As a result, trade in fish has grown sixfold since 1976. 174.1 million tons of fish are produced every year. China has been the top exporter since 2002. The USA imports the most, with Japan second biggest. Cod, hake and haddock make up the biggest share of the trade in fish by weight.
Outside Source brings you real-time news, and we've a new touchscreen to help us do that better than ever before. Social media, data feeds, fact checks and many other sources mean you'll get the best information as I get it. It's TV news for a digital world. Outside Source with me, Ros Atkins, live on BBC World News.
With less than a week to go to the UK general election on the 8th of June, Prime Minister Theresa May and opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn will face questions from audience members about the issues that matter to the British public. Join us for Question Time Leaders Special on BBC World News.
Catch up with all the latest sports news and results from around the globe. Now on BBC World News, in Sport Today.
Hi everyone, you're watching Sport Today, live from the BBC Sports Centre. I'm Nick Marshall-McCormack. Coming up on the show, the women's top seed falls on the first day of the French Open. It's a victory for Sato and Japan at the Indy 500, but that only tells half the story. And we dive deep to challenge for the America's Cup. Land Rover BAR nearly break their bow. Hi, wherever you are around the world, welcome to Sport Today. The women's world number one, Angelique Kerber, has become the first top seed to have been knocked out of the French Open in the opening round. But it was a happy return to the court for Petra Kvitova, as Patrick Geary reports.
It has never taken Petra Kvitova so much to reach the first round. Just 5 months ago, everything was in doubt. A knife attack at her home left her with tendon damage on her left hand, her playing hand. She only stepped onto a practice court earlier this month, so has to rely on skill and stealth rather than strength. First set won, the second followed with what seemed like comfort. This is the 8th time Kvitova has made it to the second round of the French Open. None will compare to this.
It was a nice and really heartwarming welcome in the Chatrier, and my team was there, my family was there, everyone who helped me through the difficult time. So I'm happy with the game, of course, but I mean, it wasn't really about the game today.
Next on court, Angelique Kerber, officially the world's best, but currently, in reality, far from it. Such is her lack of form that her defeat to Ekaterina Makarova was a strangely unsurprising surprise.
Of course, I'm disappointed that the clay court season was not so good, and at the end, maybe it's good that it's over for me. But yeah, I mean, now I don't know. I think I will go back home. I will do maybe a few days rest or a few more days. I don't know.
At this time of year from Paris, you can always see Venus. This, the elder Williams sisters' 20th straight appearance at Roland Garros. Her first came when opponent Shang Wang was 5. Still, no signs of slowing down. Patrick Geary, BBC News.
So that was on Sunday. This is Monday at Roland Garros, and on court, Philippe Chatrier, the reigning women's champion Gabi Muguruza. She was out to avoid becoming only the second defending champion since Anastasia Miskina to lose in the women's first round. But Muguruza's clay court form, it's been poor so far this year, but she has come through, beating Francesca Schiavini 6-2, 6-4 in that first match. She's followed by the men's champion Novak Djokovic. Over on court, Susan Lenglen. The 9-time champion Rafa Nadal is in action against home favourite Benoit Paire. Fernando Alonso's bid to win the Indy 500 at his first attempt came to a disappointing end with an engine failure. The McLaren F1 driver skipped the Monaco Grand Prix to race at Indianapolis. He led for 27 laps before his Honda was forced to retire with 21 laps to go. Now, that followed a major crash where New Zealand's pole sitter Scott Dixon here escaped without serious injury. It happened after Jay Howard veered into him and sent him flying into the wall. It's a crash that's been doing the rounds on social media, but so good to see that he's lucky to walk away unscathed. Now, Alonso wasn't laughing with his race shortly after the crash, that engine failing and sending him into the sheds. But the ex-F1 driver, Takuma Sato, one calling it the best moment of his racing life.
I don't know, I just cannot believe it. Right now, I just can't believe it. This is unbelievable. It means a lot to me personally, but means a lot to Japan. 2011 big earthquake, tsunami, 250,000 people still living in temporary house, and it's a suffering. So hopefully this is some energy back to Japan.
Probably better than I expect, to be leading the race and to be competitive out there. Everyone keep telling me the practice is practice, the race is a different animal, and you will see that everything becomes much more competitive. But we were there as well. We changed animal as well, and we were competitive. So happy for that. Disappointed not to finish the race, but the day in general has been very positive, a very nice experience. So thanks to IndyCar, thanks to Indianapolis, to the fans, to everyone that make this possible.
And the Dutchman Tom Dumoulin has claimed the 100th edition of the Giro d'Italia, overhauling all of his main rivals in the final stage time trial. He's the first man from the Netherlands to win the race, and it's also his first Grand Tour victory. Sitting in 4th place overall before the final ride into Milan, Dumoulin was second fastest in the time trial. So his final margin of victory, 31 seconds over Nairo Quintana, 40 ahead of last year's champion Vincenzo Nibali, who completed the podium. Sweden's Alex Noren won the European Golf Tour's PGA Championship with a blistering course record 62 in the final round at Wentworth. He overturned a 7-shot deficit to take his 5th European Tour title in 11 months. He's finished off with an eagle on the 18th to end up on 11 under par, winning by 2 shots. First prize, a nice little cheque of over $1 million. On the PGA Tour in the USA, Jon Rahm had this putt here on the final hole to try and force a playoff in Texas. The Spaniard just missing, and that meant Kevin Kisner held on to par the last and beat Rahm and Jordan Spieth, who was a shot further back. On the LPGA Tour, China